Yeah. Okay, for county staff, it looks like we have myself, Chris Lounsbury, David, Commissioner Strohmeyer, Commissioner Slotnick, Emmy Bristow, Karen Hughes, Matt Heimel. And I have a phone number ending in 4410.
That's me.
Can you state your name?
Tom Tucker.
Okay, thank you. And also for Community Council, Bonnie Roberts.
I'm here.
Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you still hear me?
Sure, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe everybody use so we kill the echo.
Say that again.
Sound is echoing.
I think if everyone mutes themselves, we'll be okay.
Can you still hear me? Okay. To finish roll call, we have Bonnie Roberts, Chris Saley, Damon Leishman, Frankie Finstein, Jane Kipp, Joshua Schultz, sorry, I'm working here with it. There we are. Karen James, did I miss anybody?
Tom Browder from Sealy's here.
Tom Browder, Stephanie, and Tom Tucker, and Lisa from East Missoula, and Chris Handley, and Jennifer Schultz.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. Feels like it's been a long time since this whole group was together. So we really have just two big things on our agenda. The first one is that Matt Heimel is going to talk about new floodplain stuff. And then we're going to go round robin and hear what's going on in everybody's world. So to start, let's kick it off with Matt.
All right, thanks. Good evening, everyone. You all hear me okay? Sometimes my microphone acts funny when I start. Looking for a nod. Okay, great. Well, I'm Matt Heimel, and I'm coming to you live from the Missoula County Planning, Development, and Sustainability Department. I'm a planner and floodplain administrator, and thanks for having me on the agenda tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about some upcoming updates to our floodplain regulations. So, in general, we have floodplain regulations as it's a function of Missoula County's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. So the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP for short, is administered by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and in exchange for offering or making available federally backed flood insurance and disaster aid as needed, communities that participate in the NFIP need to administer and upkeep floodplain regulations so that we can have wise use of land that's in flood hazard areas and also protect public health and safety from flood hazard areas. And so as part of that, we need to periodically update those regulations to remain in good standing in the NFIP, as over years standards change on the federal level, such as definitions or construction standards, and just to make sure that communities are effectively administering their floodplain programs. So the cycle that we're under right now, we just had an update for the Clearwater River. And those new floodplain maps, which were in the works for about 10 years, were finally adopted and effective at not only the county level, but also at the federal level for insurance rating purposes and regulatory purposes on October 5th of this year, just a few weeks ago. And every time maps are changed, new maps are adopted, or the flood insurance study is updated, or that information that would otherwise reflect updated flood hazard determinations from FEMA and or the state, it's required that communities demonstrate that they do have floodplain regulations that are in alignment with federal and state standards. So with the Clearwater River, what Missoula County worked out with the NRC is we would essentially have the regulations updated in 2 phases. So the first phase was updating the regulations that we had a couple of hearings for last July and August, and that was solely updating references to the maps. So there were just a few text changes saying, referencing the date that the Clearwater River floodplain maps and floodplain or flood insurance study were effective, and updating the appendix to essentially restate that we were referencing new maps. A very simple update. Now we're in the second phase of that update, and Missoula County is fully transitioning our floodplain regulations to match a model ordinance that the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, or DNRC, publishes every few years or so. So the last model ordinance that DNRC published is, I believe, 2022 or 2023, in the last year or so. And that reflects some updated standards for accessory structures, agricultural structures, some updated definitions, mainly about maintenance, what kind of maintenance activities can be done exempt from permitting, or what needs a floodplain development permit. And we're working through that transition, because part of what we should keep in mind is that the regulations will look very different. Missoula County has been operating with its own format, essentially, the way that the regulations are organized. So they will look different, but they are mostly the same, with some updated standards, as I mentioned, for accessory structures, agricultural structures, maintenance activities, definitions, and some administrative procedures. That's a very broad explanation of what the update is going to look like. We are going to have a draft that's available for public review and comment. And that draft, not only will it just be a document with regs, it'll have strike through, underlines, text change, so that everyone can see exactly what changed. We had hoped that would be available this week. Some of you may have received an email yesterday that I quickly retracted and sent a follow-up. We did have public hearings scheduled for November 9th and December 14th. I learned yesterday that we're going to delay those. And that is because we had questions, Missoula County staff, about the new standards for accessory structures and how those are implemented, because when one thing changes in a set of regulations, there can be implications somewhere else. For example, one use could be permitted in the floodway, which is a specific zone in floodplain mapping that's otherwise has higher standards. And we wanted to make sure everything was consistent across the board, that we had good explanations for that, and that we frankly just understood what was going on. Some of those questions went to the state DNRC. DNRC asked questions to FEMA. FEMA then asked questions to the state. So we're still working out exactly what some of that text looks like. And at first, we thought we would roll ahead with November 9th hearing and have the draft published with the agenda. but that isn't really the ideal way to do it because we want to make sure that that's all published well ahead of time. So right now, I don't know exactly when the public hearings will be, but that will be all posted soon, not only on Missoula County Voice, but I'll send a follow-up to a notification email blast that I sent yesterday. But we'll have that information available for public notice when we have those hearings scheduled. So dates to be determined on adoption. We'll have that all on Missoula County Voice with drafts that are available. And I think that about covers the high points of it. Of course, I'd be really happy to take any questions if anyone does. I know I probably used some technical terms, and now I'm just going on. But on a different note from the floodplain regulations, some of you might be wondering about the floodplain map update that we've also been working on for the Bitterroot, Clark Fork, and Rock Creek. I don't have an update on that for tonight. Map is still the maps are still in review by FEMA, but we'll be sure to be posting plenty of public notice and have more meetings. And I do see a hand raised.
Bonnie
not-
Roberts.
Okay, wasn't sure if I call on people or if commissioner needs to
Yeah,
do
let's
that.
go ahead.
Okay,
Sure,
I have,
Bonnie.
I have a few questions. I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer any of these questions, but people that live in the floodplain areas that have now being affected by the rezoning, they kind of want to know, does this inclusion into the floodplain devalue the property that was not in the floodplain before? Plus, is Missoula County going to reduce property taxes for those properties that become devalued due to the DNRCs and the new BFEs? And then also, are properties newly included into the floodplain required to buy flood insurance?
Hey, Matt, can I
Yes.
answer some of those value questions and maybe you talk about the flood insurance if you're open to that?
Sounds great to me.
Yeah. So who was it that spoke? Because I didn't, can you say your name?
My name is Bonnie Roberts. I also
Hey,
have some
Bonnie,
other questions.
thanks for asking those questions. I just wanted to make sure and address you when I answered. So I just want to be super clear on the tax piece of this, that Missoula County doesn't do any valuing of property. The state does that through the Department of Revenue. They determine the value of your property. And you have an opportunity after they determine that value, if you believe they didn't get it right, to appeal. So just want to be clear that that isn't something that the county does. The state does the valuing of your property. And they do that every 2 years. So we just did it this year, so it won't happen again till 2025.
But if your property is now just recently put into the floodplain, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening to people that are all of a sudden in a floodplain.
And
So,
you're totally right. I'm just responding to that one piece where you said, will the county change the value for property taxes? And I just want to be super clear and say it's the state that determines the value of your property, not the county.
okay, thank you.
And it could very well be, let's imagine it's 2025, you get a letter from the State Department of Revenue and they say, your house is worth $1 million. And you want to say, wait a minute, now it's in the floodplain, it's worth way less than that. You can appeal to the state. It isn't a county function.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to talk about flood insurance?
Sure, I always like talking about flood insurance. Thank you. And these are good questions, but by the way, so flood insurance, one thing I'll point out, Missoula County itself does not administer flood insurance. Missoula County does not require flood insurance policies, but under the National Flood Insurance Program, there is a mandatory purchase requirement for properties in a high hazard flood zone or an A zone in Missoula County, so 100-year floodplain zones, if there is a federally backed mortgage on the property. So if a property is not in mapped 100-year floodplain now, but it will be in the 100-year floodplain upon final adoption of new floodplain maps, then that will have to be a question really to someone's lender, their insurance agent, their bank. Should be really noted as well that although there is that mandatory purchase requirement for the 100-year floodplain in a federally backed mortgage, a lender can require flood insurance at their discretion. So Missoula County's role under the NFIP is to administer floodplain regulations for land use in high hazard flood zones. Or the role is to enforce those regulations to make sure that impacts of public health and safety are mitigated in flood hazard zones. We take part in floodplain mapping, and ultimately the requirement for floodplain insurance either lies with a lender or is an automatic requirement for new transactions in the floodplain. As to retroactive applicability, that again has to go to a lender. If there's any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to take those as well.
Bonnie, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, why is it that Missoula County just recently considered the DNRC's new floodplain proposal that includes so many more properties into the floodplain than in the past? Because I understand it's only like 1% that this 100-year flood thing. So all of a sudden now there's more people in the floodplain zone that never was all these years before. So what made things so different? I mean, it's kind of hard to understand why all of a sudden the properties that never were in the floodplain zone are now in the floodplain zone. Are they expecting Montana to sink?
Well, Matt, can you do part of that and I'll do part of it? So the piece that I wanted to talk about when is Bonnie, when you said, how come Missoula County is deciding to do this now? This isn't our decision. The DNRC says this is where the floodplain is, and we don't get to say yes or no to that. That just is handed down.
So that's handed down by the state and Missoula
Exactly.
County,
The
not
state
given a choice.
DNRC. This isn't, we didn't wake up one day and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we expanded the floodplain? Let's make that happen. It was quite the opposite. We get the word from the DNRC that if new floodplain maps are coming out, we have to abide. That's
Hey, Josh,
we don't have a decision point in this. It just is.
Josh, this is Dave. And Matt, you can go into more detail here, but I also believe that in some cases, folks truly were always in the floodplain, but due to updated mapping, we're only now realizing, or DNRC is only now realizing, that what was at one point in time thought to be a property outside the floodplain actually was in the past. In other cases, the river has and flood patterns have changed over time just due to changes in hydrology and the landscape. And in those cases, places that would have not been in the floodplain previously actually are now, based on the definition of a floodplain. Matt, do you want to elaborate on that?
Can I toss one other thing out, Matt? You're never going to get a word in, Matt, between us. So Bonnie, there's a really big technological change that happened here, and that is that the elevation of the earth is no longer measured by people with hand gear, but it's measured by a tool called LiDAR, which is basically a version of radar shot down from a plane. And it's
I know what that is.
incredibly accurate. And I am right with you. I owned some property that was not in the floodplain, that had very great development potential. And I'd spent quite a bit of money preparing it for development, and then found out that all that area is now in the floodplain. And the money that I'd spent on architects and engineers just basically went down the toilet. So I absolutely feel your pain. And then when I went to basically appeal this, I was told, well, if you can do better measurements than LiDAR, because the issue is the elevations. At least it was in my case. And Dave's totally right talking about the movement of the river and the channel migration zone. And our Clark Fork River is very dynamic. But it's LiDAR versus hand measurement is a big deal on elevations.
So is this going to cost more for doing any building or any updating your like barns and stuff on your property or anything like this? Because I understand there's somebody that I know that was told they weren't allowed to fix their barn back up again because he's now in the floodplain zone. I mean, is this going to cost more money just to do your regular renovations to like if your barn's old and it needs to be fixed? Is there going to be additional costs, or you're going to tell us we're not allowed to do that because we're now in a floodplain zone?
I think the
So-
answer is possibly yes in both cases, but we do have planning staff on here who could, it all depends on what's being proposed and if it's a human dwelling versus a shed or a barn.
That's a big giant difference right there, Dave. That's super important. A barn and a house are very different.
So you're not allowed to like rebuild your barn?
No, I think you could rebuild your barn. You can't build it, and you could even build a house in the floodplain. You just have to build it in a different kind of way than you would if it wasn't in the floodplain. And you may have to get insurance if you have a mortgage. And that's not based on us. That would be coming from your lender.
Okay.
Matt, do you need to do any damage control on anything that we just said?
No, thank you. I mean, these are all great questions. I really appreciate the questions that we're getting, and all your points, Josh and David, were really excellent. I just want to again emphasize that when we map a floodplain zone, I mean, you'll see on a map there's zone AE, zone floodway, zone X. It's really not like zoning or land use designations, which are intended to categorize and guide growth. We don't look at proper areas and say we want that to be a flood zone. Like Commissioner Strohmeyer explained, the floodplain mapping is a representation of the inundation pattern in a flood, of which the magnitude has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So the fact that there are properties and people's homes that are being mapped as 100-year floodplain that weren't previously in the floodplain, the way I see it is it highlights in some cases how we've gone decades without having a flood of that type. And again, it's based on updated hydrology. It's based on new hydraulic model. It's based on the best science and elevation technology that we have that is available at this time. I see some.
Tom's got his hand up and Lisa's got a hand up. Looks like Tom is the first one.
Oh, thanks, Josh. Just real quickly, Matt, is there a way you could kind of push some of this info out, particularly to the real estate community? I'm thinking with some changes, and especially since the Clearwater's been remapped, it might save some angst if the brokerage community knew about it before it goes to closing. And the title company says, well, this is in a floodplain and neither buyer nor seller, or maybe the seller, but somehow it wasn't disclosed in the negotiation process. Do you have a way of doing that? Short of posting it on the county website, which, we love, but not everybody takes a look at that.
You mean a way of posting the updated maps?
Well, and it's almost more if you did a blast via Missoula Organization of Realtors or someone, so that if I'm a new broker up here in Seeley Lake and I'm all excited because we got a deal ready to close, and it turns out it's now in the floodplain, title company says, well, wait, we can't close this. It just seems like if we could get that info farther up the kind of the process chain, it would help everyone.
Yeah, I mean, those are good points. There's a few layers that process goes through. First of all, those flood hazard checks during a property transaction are based, one for that mandatory purchase requirement, but they're based on also effective floodplain mapping. So the parties involved might not necessarily be checking out the updated floodplain maps. We're trying to put that information out there as much as possible. Last year we had postcard mailings that went out. We had multiple open house meetings where we explained it, and we also have had the information on our website for a while. We also send yearly annual letters to as many members of the real estate and lending and insurance community that we can. We try to update a list. It might not be a perfect list, but if anyone wants to be on it, please let me know, so that people know that they can always contact our office to talk about it. And I understand that sometimes there might be a transaction going, and the floodplain element might not be discovered until later in that process. I can't necessarily, control that end of things, but having training opportunities for realtors, having as much dialogue as possible will always help. Always knowing that my phone line, our office is open for people with floodplain questions, because yeah, there are some times I know of when the floodplain information either in a property purchase or in permitting, where the floodplain facts come out later than would be ideal. So as much conversations that we can have as early is good. And also I think we can also offer some continuing education credits for some of those seminars or training opportunities with realtors. So yeah, definitely I look forward to working to get those relationships going, because I definitely agree we could definitely have some more information on the front end so people don't get caught off guard later in the process.
Great, thank. I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot anyway, so I didn't know about that, but yeah, appreciate that.
I see more hands. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go down the list to Lisa.
Lisa. Yeah, I'm in East Missoula. Thank you. Just a
Lisa.
quick question. Yeah, I heard my name. No? Okay. Is there any update or information related to the Clark Fork map that you said was not ready for updating now? Is there a timeline or anything you could offer information for the Clark Fork map that's upcoming?
Good question. I really wish I could give a timeline. I just don't have one. I know the mapping project that was in a draft stage, and a lot of that draft data was prepared and is available on our website. I know that the city of Missoula was working on some levee accreditation for the Clark Fork River. Best guess, hopefully sometime during the winter, but that's exactly what I said this time last year. So really, we just need to wait until we hear from FEMA and DNRC. The next steps are to have preliminary map products issued, and that kicks off a whole frenzy of activity. I probably shouldn't say frenzy. We don't need to get into a frenzy, but we'll have more public meetings. We'll have more public notice once those come. It's really just waiting for that data to be finalized. But I won't go into a frenzy. I'll be very calm.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, Matt. Then I have Stephanie.
Hi,
Stephanie, go ahead.
This is more just like a aesthetics question. I was looking at your map and I was wondering a couple of things. One, will there ever be a time when you can incorporate the city of Missoula into your map? And just so that you can kind of see the overall picture, and then maybe like a little slider bar that would show you what's changed over time. Like, what did the old map look like versus what's the new map look like? And it's just because I like maps and yours is cool, but it seems disjointed a little bit.
Yeah, I think those are good questions. Yeah, if anyone didn't know, Missoula County publishes GIS and interactive maps for floodplains. It's one of the things we do to have the word out there for people to access flood hazard information. Stephanie, I think were you the first part of your question about the city floodplain? Were you talking about the Missoula County interactive map viewer?
Your the map that's in the link in the agenda that was published today. So yours has it. You can see Missoula County, but then the areas, there's like the black with the red lines through it that says this is Missoula City. So out here in East Missoula, you know, we're kind of disjointed. We've got we're and even more now than, you know, potentially more going forward. Where part of East Missoula is city and part of it is county, and so then the city areas are blacked out on the map, but the county areas are still visible. And yeah, and
Yeah,
potentially we're going to even have more. I just think it's cool. It's a cool map. I just like, it would be neat to see the whole of the floodplain and the way that the whole thing looks.
it's a good question. I understand that it can be sometimes a little frustrating. Maybe you're trying to understand the floodplain around you, and you run into, oh, it's the city of Missoula. It's a void of dashed lines. You know, part of that comes down to, we do have two distinct floodplain administration programs between the city and the county, and the maps themselves, the actual floodplain map that you see on this or any flood insurance rate map, is a visual guide. And the regulatory floodplain is actually where that base flood elevation or the water surface elevation in a 100-year flood intersects the natural ground. And part of why we don't show the city floodplain is that could start to intersect with guidance for residents or people interested in doing floodplain or any development near or within city floodplain. We also update our floodplain boundaries based on projects that people do with FEMA for either a letter of map amendment or letter of map revision or a elevation certificate. So there is a possibility that there's a chance that we could have conflicting information if we were to start posting the city floodplain. I think, you know, overall it would be a good thing to collaborate on. I just myself don't know if the staff for the geographic information systems within the city and the county have that capacity to start sharing that, but something we could absolutely talk about with the city.
Matt, did you see Karen's comments in the chat?
Yep, and that's the next thing. It's a good point. So there's a draft floodplain map viewer. I probably should have kept my screen open. And this one is generated by the DNRC for the floodplain mapping project update. And it actually has current floodplain mapping, but you can compare draft mapping to the current mapping. But I really like your point about doing a slider. And I'm going to talk to our GIS staff about that, because I'm just going in here for some arbitrary example. You can see draft, current, comparison, but having a slider would be pretty neat. I like that idea.
And then Karen, did you want to
Interesting.
add something?
Sure. Hi, this is Karen Hughes with Planning Development and Sustainability. I work with Matt. And I guess the one thing I wanted to add, I just wanted to emphasize something that Matt said, and it kind of goes back to a question that I think Bonnie had, is like, what happened? Why the big change? And I think Commissioner Slotnick or Commissioner Strohmeyer also hit on this as well. The one thing to know is that back, and Matt, correct my dates here, keep me honest. Back in like the 80s, we had new maps created, new flood studies done. And maybe it was even longer than that. But that was the last time new studies were actually done. And the science has really changed. The rivers have changed and the science has changed. And we have a lot better data. We mentioned LIDAR data and also the analyses have changed. And we have a lot better data. And so although the maps kind of stayed static from like the 80s forward, even though we went through processes of doing floodplain map changes, it was just taking old maps and digitizing them and continuing to adopt the same maps. The new modeling, the new data, this is the first time for the Clark Fork that we are actually pulling that in. And so that's why there's a pretty big change for some property owners. Obviously, it's hardest on the people who are getting pulled in, And but there are some people who are being pulled out because the science says they're not in the, they don't have the same floodplain risk that we thought they did under the old map. So I just wanted to emphasize that the science and the data has really changed, and the jurisdictions maps have not. The risk has been there though. Now correct me where I was wrong, Matt.
That was all correct. Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions for Matt? Great, thank you, Matt.
Thank you. And I think this was I'm really glad that some of these questions came up, and it makes me realize that I think if anyone else in the public or the community councils are interested, I'd be happy to meet with you to talk about floodplain. I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot of questions, and I'd like to say I have a lot of answers, but at least I have some answers.
You did good. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Cheryl, for this next part, if you wouldn't mind kind of calling on the different community councils one at a time, and we can hear what people are up to.
Okay, sounds good. We will start with, get to the top here. Do we have someone on from Bonner, Milltown?
Jane Kipp is here.
Okay, go ahead, Jane. Do you have anything to add or?
Yes, they're trying to get a few new members on our council. And we have a woman named Jessica Glebke who came and spoke to us. She's a member of the Parks and Trails Advisory Board and lives in West Riverside. And they think that she will become a member of the council. And a gentleman named John Wilkie that nobody's ever met, but he is also a potential member. One of the biggest things that Bonner is talking about doing is changing the name of the community council to include all of the little towns and areas around Bonner. Other things that they were talking about doing is trying to find out why all the trees around Bonner are dying. And next month we are going to have a talk by one of the state entomologists from the DNRC, because it looks like all kinds of trees are dying, probably between Missoula and at least Bonner. It's becoming concerning. So that's everything.
Okay, anyone else from Bonner that was wanting to add anything? Okay, I think I have Chris from Clinton. Go ahead. Do you have anything any questions or any updates? I know you're saying that you're pretty new.
We're the brand new community council, so we're learning a lot right now, and we're getting educated every meeting we have. So it's a learning experience, and I'm sure it will continue. Right now, me personally, I don't have any questions. I'm just really listening and taking down some notes, but there is some other Clinton council members that are attending this online meeting. They might have some questions also. And that's all I have.
Hey, Chris,
Okay.
would you mind kind of telling people what's up with the skate park?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The skate park did have its official opening on Saturday, and I was down there at one point in the day. There was a lot of kids there. There was some family members there. I am very impressed with this skate facility that we have here in Clinton. Very impressed. It's state of the art. Obviously, it's brand new. And I think for a small rural community like we are, this is huge, very huge. And I think there's more things to come surrounding the current skate park. And like I said, it's a beautiful facility, and we are thrilled to have that. It looks like we have a question from one of our Clinton council members. Chris Hanley's got her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Hello, everybody. So we are in the process of reviewing the bylaws. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, okay. And we offered the community to comment on those draft bylaws. And I was just wondering where we can direct the public to view those draft bylaws. Is there a place they can go? Can you send them to us and we can put them somewhere? That's my question.
We can create a site where or a location where people can link, provide you a link somewhere on the internet where you can where we can post the bylaws and people can provide comments. Probably we would use the Missoula County Voice page, which can provide general information about the community council, and then a link to the draft bylaws. Emmy.
Yeah, so we have the Clinton Community Council. Since we had a Missoula County Voice page kind of created for you guys back when it was in the development stage of this council. And I think that would be a great spot to place the bylaws and get comments. So if you guys have them, feel free to send them to me. I'll stick my email in the chat and we can get those up so you can get some comments on them.
And we can update that page to state that the community council's been formed, who the the membership and basic information, when their meetings are, and then provide the bylaws and an opportunity for comment.
Yeah, and I think hopefully the rest of it should be mostly updated as far as like when you guys meet and that everything. Yeah, but yeah, we can make sure we'll put it back on the homepage and have the bylaws on there. So no problem.
Chris, does that work for you?
I think so. And also, should we just put those generic draft bylaws up there, or should we as a council, fill in the blanks first? Do you think it's okay if we just put those generic draft bylaws?
I think you can. I mean, you will need to fill in the blanks at some point, but I think that's as good a starting point as any. Like, here's the basic bylaws template that the county uses for community councils. Feel free to provide comments. We'll be updating them to be Clinton Community Council specific. But generally, I think we're trying to encourage the community councils to use more or less what's in the template other than the name of the community council. So I think that's a pretty safe start.
Okay, and then who should we work with to get that done? Should we work with Kyla? We've generally been working with Kyla, or?
Yeah, Emmy and Kyla together can help you make that happen.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, anyone else from Clinton that wants to add anything or have any other updates they want to address?
I would like to make a comment. We did have a special guest that was talking to us about bear awareness. And I'm really glad he said something, because last night, or actually it was 6 o'clock this morning, I had a bear in my backyard and they were heading toward the chicken coop, and we found the footprints, and a neighbor ended up treeing the bear up on our property in the front. So I'm kind of letting everybody in the Clinton area, and I know my friend that lives in Bonner has also had a bear in her front yard. So I just want everybody that lives in the woods to please be careful. They are out and about. So that's all I have to say. And I think everybody should probably invite this person that does bear awareness to their meetings if you live in a rural area where bears are at, because it would behoove everybody to know exactly what you need to do to protect yourself.
Hey, and if I might interject, thanks for that comment. This is Dave Strohmeyer. it's not just rural folks. So I live smack dab in the middle of Missoula on East Pine Street, and we have bears in my yard and in the alley literally every single night. So be bear aware wherever you live.
Yeah, that's kind of scary because it was 10 feet away from my back door. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like a close encounter with the wilderness kind, you know? That's all I have to say.
Okay. Anyone from East Missoula?
Steph, do you want to go first or?
I can go first. So a
Okay.
couple of things just that's amazing about the skate park in Bonner, or in Clinton, that's very cool. We would love to get something going like that in East Missoula rather than all of the apartments that we're getting, but congratulations. And then the Bonner about the trees. I have a tree in my front yard that's dying, and I'd be very curious to get the name of your entomologist. And I think, Lisa, I think it's a good idea to maybe have somebody come to our meeting also.
Sure.
I believe our meeting is on the 13th, and the woman's name is Amy Gannon. She's down on Spurgeon Road, and I can send you her telephone number. Supposedly, they are doing a survey through Western Montana of why trees are dying. And that might help. It's not done yet, but it's becoming concerning because when they die fast, and nobody seems to know why.
Yeah, I do. I've like I said, I've got one in my front yard that's dying, and it's sad to see. It's sad to watch.
Wow.
But as for what East Missoula is doing, we're plugging along with Summer Street and all of the development that we have going on. And Lisa, if you want to chime in, what else?
I was going to ask the county commissioners that one of the things that I'm noticing when we are hearing about this development as it comes to fruition or whatever permitting, the city and the county don't appear to be communicating about anything. Like the county's left out because the developer's pursuing city. Therefore, it appears to be a complete bypass of any county. Yet, in order to get to this neighborhood, you have to go through the county. And so the city's going to put 253 homes around county with nothing, no communication with the county that's about to receive all these cars and all of these needs for services by these 253 homes that will be coming in our neighborhood. So that was kind of what I wanted to bring tonight was what did the city and county actually do to communicate about when city happens within a county, you know?
Hey, Karen, are you still there?
Yes.
I could speak to this too, but I thought maybe you could give a little history on these sort of jurisdictional boundaries and how a project goes from one to the other, and then I can, me and or Dave can go after you.
Sure. So the city has the authority, because this is proposed for annexation, zoning, and subdivision. The city has the authority to take the lead in the review process as long as the annexation completes. The city has contacted all of the county agencies. They've contacted the planning office, the commissioners, the Parks, Trails, Open Lands program, the Public Works Department, and has requested comments. I know our office, Planning, Development, and Sustainability, the planning office has provided comments to them and encouraged them to make sure they're connected with Public Works and Parks, Trails, and Open Lands. I know that Parks, Trails, Open Lands is working with them. And I'm sure Shane is from Public Works as well. What happens here though is that the developer has to meet the rules in the city. And the city is obligated to connect with all the jurisdictions and the agencies that might be affected. So they're going through this process where they're going to collect all this information, both the city staff and the developer. That's the process they're in right now, to both complete the application to the point where it's ready for review, and also to identify the potential impacts and the potential mitigations that might be warranted. And so there's a little bit of this kind of weird back and forth thing where the city and the developers asking for information, agencies are providing it to them, and not just us. They have to balance our input with the need from city agencies, with the need from state and federal agencies. They ask for it from a whole, and from the community council. They ask for everyone to kind of put their stuff in the hat at the same time. And then what will happen is the city will go through the process to, once the application is deemed complete and ready for review, there's enough information ready to review, then they'll go through the full kind of mitigation analysis. You know, what are the impacts? What needs to be mitigated? How, based on what the input we've received from agencies, from the city, from the county, and from others, how do we want that to be mitigated? And that's where it's really in their court. They have gotten our information. They will ask us for follow-up, but they also have to balance that with what their needs are as a city, and then what other agencies have to say. Fire questions, since I just kind of rambled.
No, that was really good, Karen. You did a way better job than I did. What do you know? You're a planner, right? So the sort of layperson speak I would say to this, Lisa, is that this is absolutely not a done deal, that these houses are just going to happen and that's all there is. In fact, there is a humongous mountain of process that these developers have to go through. And as they go through that process, impacts to the greater area will be identified and mitigations will also be identified. So this road's going to be hit with a mountain of traffic. What does that mean for this road? The road's going to have to change in a new way. So it is not as if these houses are going to be plopped down and nothing else around will experience any change and they'll just get pounded because of this development. A whole bunch of things will have to change. Specifically what those are will be identified in the process, and the things the developer will have to do to adjust to the consequences their development is wreaking on people will also be identified. So you can be involved in this process, follow it. There will be plenty of opportunity for public comment. I guess the gist of my whole thing here is it's not a done deal that it's going to look any one specific way.
Josh, can I jump in?
Please.
Okay, I'll be a bit of a wet blanket here in that while certainly there's a lot of process yet to come, state law is the ultimate arbiter as far as how much can be required of a developer. And there certainly have been many instances outside of the city for subdivision proposals that we've reviewed where we would sure like to have required more mitigations or even denied a subdivision, and we just did not have the authority to do so under state law. So there are those inherent limitations placed upon the governing bodies of either the city or the county. The other piece is, and I think Karen hit on this, we as Missoula County don't have veto authority over if a property owner petitions for annexation into the city. We don't have the ability as Missoula County to say no, and folks probably know that already. And I guess then the final piece, and this is kind of where we began with your questions, Lisa, is there, even though it might not be readily apparent to folks, there is communication between the city and the county, and we are offering comment on what is being proposed. So that's ongoing as we speak. It is a little bit awkward, as Karen alluded to also.
So it seems like you are giving comment, but the county residents are not giving public comment to the county before they give the county comment to the city. That link seems to be missing. Am I right?
Well, I think the request for comment, we made sure that the East Missoula Community Council was on that as one of the entities to kind of represent the community, was on that list. In addition, the individual property owners surrounding the property, once it's deemed sufficient for review, they will get notice. Anyone within adjoining the property or within 300 yards, I can't remember, will get notice as well. So this is the time for the East Missoula Community Council and any of the folks involved in that organization or aware of it can provide comment directly to the city, and they'll take it and they'll put it in with everything else that they're kind of considering at this point. This is kind of the very preliminary part of the public comment process during the time when an application is still being deemed sufficient. After it's deemed sufficient and starts the public review process, there will again be, like I said, there'll be the notice to the adjoining property owners, and there'll be the opportunity, it'll be up on a engage page on the city. The Missoula County has what we call Voice. The city of Missoula has their engage page. It's the same kind of platform. All the information about the subdivision will be up there and available for folks to be providing comment on through the public review process. So through the planning board, which is a city county planning board, as well as through the city council.
And Lisa, you're by no means late. It has most of
No,
we're
just getting started.
Hasn't even happened yet. So I just nervous because it sounds like you're characterizing this as this was done. We never got a say. What the heck? In fact, it's actually preliminary, just beginning. So you're right on time to comment. And when it goes to planning board, that's a big, huge public meeting that you could be part of. And then again, at city council, you don't have to be a city resident to go speak at city council.
Yeah,
they'll be very interested to hear.
You're not too late by any stretch.
From the city, from Dave from the city. I think East Missoula, our community is mostly concerned with the developer ghosting us. And that's what we have been dealing with. So it's not the county or the city, it's mostly the developer.
I have kind of a question kind of tailing on that, and I don't want to use up all the meeting time, but what is the timeline? What comes first? Do they get annexed first, or do they, and when does that happen pretty early in the process?
They'll do it all as a combined project. I believe the project is to do annexation, zoning upon annexation, and subdivision all in one fell swoop. So it kind of all has to be approved. And where they're at in the process is they don't have a complete application. They've submitted, they have all the items in their application packet, but they don't have enough information about all of their items to be deemed complete. So until they're deemed complete, it can't start public review. So they're still trying to get a complete application packet. And I believe we heard from city staff beginning of this week, and they said that the development team has like a couple pages worth of stuff that they have to get done before they're complete. And so they go back and forth with the city staff about what it takes to have an application that is ready to enter the public review process. And that's where they're at. Once they enter the public review process, I believe they have 85 working days to get from the point their application is deemed complete to city council decision.
Thank you.
And what was the city? So the county has the Voice. What is the city? What is the name?
It's called Engage Missoula.
Engage. Thank you. Okay. All right, yeah, that was mostly just how the two entities interact with, like, thanks.
Karen, do you have contact info for the developers so we could encourage them to be in touch with East Missoula Community Council?
Yes, I do have, I think I do. Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to them and encourage them to connect with the community council.
That would be great. Thank you.
The 406 engineering, yeah. That's who we've been trying to communicate with.
Okay.
Anybody else from East Missoula on, or is it just Lisa and Stephanie? You're the only ones. Okay, do we have anybody from Lolo? I don't see anybody. Is there anybody on from Lolo? Okay, and whoever wants to go first for Sealy Lake. Tom, do you want to go ahead? Do you have any questions or updates for the
No,
councils?
no questions. We had, I guess it was the inaugural community conversations meeting up here back in mid to late September with all the commissioners and a lot of the department heads. Thanks to Emmy for organizing it, and Alicia, I think much better turnout than anyone expected. It was great for the community, particularly given our more rural location, to have this kind of attention from the county, and just really good feedback for the most part. Already one follow-up that's important is we will have environmental health at our community council meeting in November, because not surprisingly, the three big issues that came up as they did the round robin from table to table were the sewer, or lack thereof, or what's going on in the septic, affordable housing, and law enforcement. So if and when it comes to your community, definitely promote it, and I think you'll find it's really a great event. The other thing is we are now fully staffed with 7 members. Jeanette Smith joined us thanks to the commissioner appointment. So we're now the full council, and she was there at our October meeting. So that's the report from Sealy.
Okay,
I think
thank
I might-
you. Go ahead,
I
Amy.
might tag on to that a little bit and just talk about, for the rest of you who are on, we are planning to hit your communities this coming year for a community conversation event, just like Tom explained. Sealy was kind of the kickoff, and we learned a lot at it, and we're hoping that as they go along, we'll get better and better, and we want them to, it'll be a rotation, so then we'll come back to your community. And the next one that we're planning right now is Bonner Milltown in January. So, but all your communities will be hit, so I'll get a hold of you as we come along.
Okay, thank you, Emmy. Is there anyone else from Sealy that wants to add anything? I don't see anybody on from the Swan Valley. Is there anybody on from Swan Valley? Crickets? Anybody from West Valley? We have Tom. Are you still on, Tom?
On the
Tom
12th of
Tucker.
this month, Mr. Slotnick came out and presented a very interesting presentation about how the tax system works with the county. So that was very interesting. We also had a meeting there, the speaker talked about incorporating, and another discussion about TEDs up around the Y with all the new building that's going on. And our next meeting will be the next month on the 9th. We're going to discuss some of the updates on what's going out there with the Smurfit Stone EPA cleanup. Other than that, that's about all I know. So, and another point that I'd like to bring out too is we used to get updates. Years ago, we used to get updates on any building that was going out into the Frenchtown area. We haven't seen any of those for probably 6-8 years since I've been on the board. I used to see a lot of it in the paper, and they don't even do that anymore. But that's all I got.